We're not going to have any more like her.
She's part of our heritage, really.
Even in front of, we used to have 3,000 people at the Cornwall Coliseum. I mean, she would be unfazed.
She will always be remembered as Mrs. Rosewarne, with all her humour and her yarns.
Somebody that took you on a dream trip to a fantasy island.
A lot of people thought she was, well, past it, but she didn't. To me, she's still in her prime.
She's a Cornish pixie, she's a Spice Girl, and she's everything what a modern person could be.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the excitement is rising because I hear that our guest has arrived. So if you are from Redruth, I strongly recommend that you leave quickly by the back door, because our First Lady of Cornwall, Cornwall's favourite lady, the Queen of Camborne, Mrs. Rosewarne, is here. I don't know whether to curtsy or
no,
not.
Don't bother. Just take me as natural, you know. Oh, it's lovely. Isn't the chapel beautiful?
It is quite beautiful. So have you spent much time in the doctor's surgery recently?
Not so much. They haven't got so much time for you now, you know. I went up there last week and I said to him, I'd had this bit of rash on my arm, you see. And I thought, well, there's no harm to ask him. I don't go very often. So he got a book out, and I was quite anxious about it. So he looked at me, he said, Mrs. Rosewarne, have you had this before? And I said, yes, I have. He said, well, you got it again. I think of Mrs. Rosewarne as awful gossip, loves a bit of gossip. But I think she's, as I remember, say, my grandmother, and people always think of her like that, like I am, short and fat. I was born in Camborne 85 years ago. Born in the house that I lived in for 75 years. I worked all my life as a secretary and retired 25 years ago, and Mrs. Rosewarne was created just before that. Do you know, when I was young, the different denominations didn't mix. I think it's wonderful now because we go to each other's churches. I've done services. Most of the young farmers' clubs over the years, and I think I counted up the other day nearly 60 WIs in the county that I've been to. And any amount of private parties, like golden weddings, I've lost count of those. The funeral directors' dinners, I've done them west, south and mid Cornwall. Met some lovely people. So he went, rung up the bishop. He said to the bishop, is it all right for me to bury a Methodist? And the bishop said, bury as many of them as you can find. But I have told them only one can have me. So there's no point in they're all following me up because I can only use one. I have told them that. Well, I think there must be a bit of Mrs. Rosewarne in me, or else I wouldn't be able to impersonate her quite so well, would I? Because I'm called Mrs. Rosewarne as often as I am by my real name, you see. Get letters addressed to Mrs. Rosewarne, and people don't know any different.
Good morning, Miss Miller.
Oh, good morning.
You've got the men only sign up.
Oh, lovely. I can't wait to get in. How many are here already?
Everyone knows her. If she's in here and we've got new customers, sometimes they say, oh, recognise that voice as Mrs. Rosewarne's voice. And of course, it's Lilla. If they've heard her on the radio, but not actually seen her, some of them.
Now, Mary, that's right. You come here and see fair play. I'm a bit worried now.
There's no difference between Miss Miller and Mrs. Rosewarne. If you saw her doing her act with a fur coat and a fur hat, and you listen to her aggravating Gail and myself, you would think, yeah, it's the same. That's just natural to her, I think.
Why I've been coming in here for 10 years, I don't know, really.
You would never find your way anywhere else.
Miss Miller, for her age, I won't mention her age because she'll hit me with her stick. Compared to our other customers, is very, very lively. I think she's young in attitude.
You've got to put the finishing touches,
That's
Mary.
Right. What are you up to this week then?
Well, we've got a busy week coming. We're down at the Salvation Army.
Yeah.
We're going down to St.Ives Guild Hall with the Gadrevi singers.
Very good. You've got a very busy day.
Yes, and I've got a very busy day as well because I'm having a very special visitor. Friday I shall be in bed all day. With a damp cloth on my forehead. Oh dear.
Lilla!
Well, what a lovely surprise. Come
Lovely to see you.
inside, Chris.
Having a flower festival, are you?
Well, aren't they looking nice? Yes, I've had them given to me. They're lovely, aren't they?
When I was producing Morning Sow West up in Plymouth, about 25 years ago, I suppose, this tape came through the post. And it was absolutely, straight away, it was brilliant. Do you remember Jeremy Mills? He recorded this with you, do you remember?
It was the very first recording I made.
Have a listen to this.
And how did the character of Mrs. Rosewarne arise?
Well, primarily because I wanted to talk about my son and grandchildren, and I thought it sounded a bit more respectable if I was a Mrs. And of course Rosewarne is a really Cornish name. That's why I chose Rosewarne.
That's lovely, isn't it? But there's more.
Do you know, I
There
remember
is.
when I made that,
Yeah?
I could hardly speak because I was so nervous that I couldn't move my tongue. I felt ill.
You soon got over that. We'd had comedians in this country before. Beryl Reid from Birmingham, Elsie and Doris Waters, I suppose the Cockney pair, do you remember? And 10-ton Tessie. But nothing for Cornwall. But then you started making these cassettes and you were away. You were in your element. I mean,
Oh, yes, it was.
let's see if we can pick up a bit of this.
My dear life, I'm feeling just killed. I've been doctors this morning. I said to him, my right knee is aching awful. I don't know what to do with that. Now, he said, look here, Mrs. Rosewarne, I'm sorry, but I can't do nothing for you. That's old age, and you'll have to put up with it. I said, that's something funny, isn't that? Because my left knee is the same age as the right one, but my left knee isn't aching. He said,
refined now,
never
aren't
suffer
I?
from lockjaw, do we, Miss Rosewarne?
It's brilliant stuff, isn't it?
Very broad, though, isn't it?
I think that's the endearing thing, really. She's not putting it on, really. She's not saying, look at me, aren't I funny? She just is naturally funny.
You know my son, Nina, of course. You know of my son, don't you? Well, he ain't the brightest. He'd turn after his father. But I went somewhere one day and they said, we would love to hear a little bit more about Mr. Rosewarne. So I said, so would I. We leave it. It's a sore subject. So we don't mention him very much. Just to say that my son remained with me. He came home to me one day and he said, Mother, I want to go in a male voice choir. So I went to our church organist and I said, would you listen to him sing and tell me whether you think he's worth a few lessons? Well, he put my son to sing a hymn. And you know, before he got to the end of the second verse, the organist had the tears running down his face. Oh, I thought he's very moved. Anyway, when we came to the end of the hymn, I said, what about it? Do you think he'll ever make a tenor? He said, my dear Mrs. Rosewarne, he'll be lucky if he ever make 30 bob. Well, in real life, of course, I never married. That was taken when I was 12 months old with my parents.
And that's you there?
That's me.
What have
This
you got
one
there?
was, this was an aunt. My aunt came home and she used to like to dress us up. And I don't know at that age how I ever consented to be dressed up like a bridesmaid. I don't know. I nearly had them up to the altar once or twice. And then they changed their mind. They saw the light and backed out. So there we are again. This gentleman, he'd sold up home here and he decided to go out to Australia. And I met him when we had one or two meals together. And he did mention to somebody that he wished he hadn't booked if he'd met me before. He booked. And then he asked me to come out there. Well, it wasn't easy at that time. I had my mother quite ill. And I was working and they depended on me, really. So I think it was for the best. I got to boast about something, haven't I? He had a lucky escape. His daughter came home from work last week and he said, come in here a minute, dear, I got a bit of good news for you. So they went inside and he said, now look, I've had a chat with John this afternoon. He's a very nice young man and I've no objections whatever to your getting married. She said, well, thank you very much, Father. That's very kind of you. But I'm having second thoughts. Because she said, I'm not sure I want to leave Mother. Well, he said, that needn't bother you because you can take Mother with you. I never had any family of my own, But I've always been very close to my nephew, Tim.
Aunt Lilla's very young at heart and extremely broad-minded for a lady of her age. Perhaps the strongest memories I have are of going into her office. She worked in a big office with my father, and I would call into the office on my way home from playgroup and sit on her knee and ruin all the typing she'd spent the day doing. That was my earliest memories, really.
I'm always saying Tim does too much, worries too much about me, but he does it automatically. You know, and if I want to know anything, if I get mail or something I don't understand, I just say to him, what do you think about this? And so I rely on him more or less. I started babysitting for Tim and his sister, and then of course their mother told them to call me Auntie Lilla, but there's no relationship there at all, though they're closer to me than a lot of relatives, really.
Hello, my old darling. How are you?
Hello, do come in.
Hey, how are you?
Lovely
Seen you for years.
No, my
Well, I came across her by reputation originally. I met her 25 years ago for the first time, and her reputation stood up.
This old gentleman was down in our recreation ground, sitting down back in the summer, lovely afternoon, and all of a sudden a little frog jumped up on the seat beside him. And the old man smoothed him down. You know, he was shining in the sun, she smoothed him down. Well, of course, the frog, like they do, started to speak. Now, he said, if you kiss me, I will turn into a beautiful princess. Well, the old man made nothing of it, and they thought, well, perhaps he was a little bit deaf, so he repeated it, you see. If you kiss me, I shall turn into a beautiful princess. So the old man said, well, I tell you what, he said, I heard you the first time, but at my age, I would rather have a talking frog.
Citroën Zara Picasso, free your mind. Celebrate the success of Britain's best-selling MPV and get a new 1.6 ISX for only $11,995 with air conditioning at no extra cost until the end of September.
At Marks & Spencer, we wait until our summer fruits are as plump as can be. We wait until they're as sweet as can be. Only then do we consider them ripe for the picking. Marks & Spencer, extraordinary food every day.
Massage your senses when you shower. New Palmolive Aromatherapy Shower Gel with essential oils of patchouli, lavender and ylang-ylang. Feel it on your skin and in your mind. New Palmolive Aromatherapy. Massage your senses.
For over 20 years, our government sent more than 10,000 British children to a new life.
The master of the orphanage said who'd like to go to Australia. Everybody put their hand up and said, me too.
Abandoned and abused in a living hell.
It ruined my life.
Not too much to ask? A special report, Wednesday at 10:55 on ITV1.
When I'm home, before I leave home, I think, oh, I wish I hadn't promised to go. I don't like getting to a place too soon before the performance starts, because you're sitting down and then you're thinking, oh, well, I should forget what I'm going to say, or all sorts of things. But although I've been doing these stories for so many years, I still feel nervous. My memory's not always good at home, but I do seem to remember the stories. So far, I kept the memory. I mean, my memory may go at any time. I don't know. I always plan the first story and the last, because you want to catch their attention, I think, right away. So you tell one or two short ones first. That's what I find helps me. Now, I had a very big disappointment last week. I went to our Darby and Joan Club dinner. Well, I didn't eat much for the day, because it's a free meal. You may as well take advantage of it. Well, when I got there, I was quite hungry. Well, I looked at it. I thought, well, it must be vegetarian. I couldn't see much meat, no gravy. I thought, well, I wish I stayed home. Anyway, I ate it because I was so hungry. The waiter came round for our plates. So he said, how did you find your steak, madam? Well, I said I was lucky, really. I moved a Brussels sprout and there he was.
Mrs. Rosewarne, how long now have you been making people laugh?
Well, it is quite a long time, Jethro, yes.
I think I would say to anybody in comic anywhere, listen to her tapes and try to copy that beautiful timing and the lovely warmth, a natural warmth. I've been envious of her warmth and timing all my life.
Now, this farmer's daughter got engaged to a young man who worked up in Plymouth in the bank or something. Didn't know...
And how did you find your audiences? Did he?
Oh, they were good. I tell you, Jethro, at my age now, mostly is sympathy. They think, oh, poor old soul, we'll humor her a bit. But I, like for mine, I mean, I do a quarter of an hour at the most, really. And I just like to talk to them. Yeah. So when he was bringing his parents down to meet hers for the first time, this girl got a bit angry.
Comedy is about where the people think you are with your story and where you actually finish. Now, the greater that distance between where the people, their imagination have gone, and where you actually finish, is the extent of the laughter you'll get. If people read the end, and you'll get that much. If they don't read the end, you get that much. And she was the master at it, or still is.
She said, there is one thing, Mother, when we're having a meal, Father is very inclined to talk about manure, and it's not very nice at the table. She said, do you think you might get him to say fertilizer? So Mother said, well, I'll try, but it took me 15 years getting to say manure.
Her roots are the same roots as the people she's playing to. So they haven't got to imagine themselves to be somewhere else. And they know what she is saying is right because they've lived with it. The same as Mrs. Rosewarne. And what she's actually telling them is what they basically know, but humorized.
This lady I would like to introduce to you. She's a Red Ruth lady. And she's a bit troublesome sometimes, so be careful with her. Well, there's about 3 miles between Camborne and Red Ruth. But there is always been a very friendly rivalry between the two. I go in there a lot. I mean, I've got a lot of friends in Red Ruth. I'll say that quietly. But I go in there a lot. And they always expect me to tell a few tales against Red Ruth.
And where are you from, please?
Camborne.
Oh, Camborne.
Yes. Have you ever heard of it? Have you heard of it?
Yes.
I was christened here 85 years ago.
Yeah.
And I came to Sunday school when I was 3.
And you've been coming regular ever since?
Fairly, yes. And my mother was a Sunday school teacher and in the choir. My grandfather was the organist here for many years. Mm. And so it's been a family church, really.
So how much do you think of your humour have come from the chapel?
Well, I don't know. It's a bit difficult to say. Not a lot, I don't think.
But, I mean, a lot of your stories
are related
yes, they
to the
have.
Chapel. They have, that's true. Do you know, my friend took her little grandson to chapel for the first time last Sunday. When they came round with a collection plate, he said, don't pay for me, Granny, because I'm under 5. I'm pleased to say I come from Camborne. There are a lot of prettier places, I know, but all my roots are here and all my interests are here. It's a bit difficult to explain that. It's just home. To me, Camborne's home, and when anybody comes to live here, I feel as if I ought to welcome them.
When upon life's billows you are tempest-tossed, when you are discouraged, thinking all is lost, count your many blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Count your blessings, name them one by one, count your blessings, see what God has done. Count your blessings.
I think if you have a laugh, however poorly you're feeling or miserable or worried, if somebody tells you something and you laugh for a minute or two, it does brighten you, doesn't it? It takes for 2 or 3 minutes, you're forgetting yourself. Now, this gentleman used to talk a lot about the dangers of alcohol. And we know with our young people today it is a big problem. But he came to speak to a meeting of women my age. I suppose he looked at us and thought, well, they aren't likely to go on the bottle now. So he said, ladies, I am not going to give you a lot of statistics as I usually do. I'm going to do a little demonstration. So he asked for a glass of water, like you would have here, a glass of water. And In it, he put his hand in this pocket, and he took out a little tin, and in that tin there was a little garden worm. His head was moving, you could see he was living. And then he put his hand in this pocket and took out a little miniature bottle. Now he said, ladies, in this bottle is whiskey. Watch me carefully. I was watching him like a fox. First of all, he put the worm in the glass of water, and it swam around and round as happy as anything. If you hadn't seen this, you wouldn't believe it, because when he added the whiskey, within a few seconds, that worm had dropped dead down the bottom of the glass. Now, he said, can any of you ladies tell me the moral of this story? And there was a lady up at the side. She said, yes, sir, I can. If we got worms, we must drink whiskey. I don't know whether Mrs. Rosewarne has kept me younger or not. She does keep me on my toes a bit. Mind, I don't take her out as often as I used to do. I'm not able to do it so often now. But I don't feel like cutting it out altogether, you know. I'm going out next week if all is well, to a couple.
What was your favourite teacher like?
Well, I went to a very small school. The head teacher taught everything. So, and she was my favourite because I respected her a lot. She was a lovely teacher. Miss Thomas, she was called. Well, from time to time, I do get asked to local schools to talk about Camborne when I went to school, actually, my school days, which you can't compare them with today. And they're quite fascinated about that. I liked her very much. I think she lived to be over 90, so I didn't kill her with worry. You know, looking after me, she might have had a bad time, mightn't she?
Did you have pocket money?
Well, yes, I suppose. I don't know that I had any regular pocket money, but things were very cheap. You do wonder what their future may be. And you could get a halfpenny bar of chocolate, which lovely age, I think. I was looking at them this morning, and I thought, oh, everything ahead for them. Everything's going for them. You're going to get some smacks as well, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, we don't go through without problems, do we? There I am with all the gentlemen. We all received watches for long service. I think, looking back, I would probably have done exactly the same things as I did.
Holmans, my nan works in Holmans.
One or two things might have altered, but no, I think you do what is there at the time, or you act in the way that seems right to you at the time. Can't do any more, can you? I remember hearing my mother say once, she didn't mind about dying, but the method of dying worried her. How she was, you know, how she was going to die, what was going to affect her, whether it was something sudden or whether it was going to be long drawn out. I think perhaps that part of it makes, when you're older, you think about that a bit. I've often thought I'd like to see my own funeral, to know who comes. And who sent flowers? I have made plans for my funeral. We have got a family grave up at Centenary, so I know where I shall be buried, actually. Well, I think Mrs. Rosewarne would like to be remembered that she'd bring a smile to people's faces. As they mentioned her, they perhaps would recall a story she used to tell, or something like that, you know, something that she'd said that amused them. I would like them to remember me, well, cheerfully. I don't want them to think that I was no misery, you know.
She has created a tradition, and she'll be remembered forever as being totally a one-off. She could end up with a statue up beside Richard Trevithick. Mrs. Rosewarne, she's as important to Camborne as he was. She's fantastic. And if I had to sum her up, I would say that to anybody that ever told a story in Cornwall, I would say Mrs. Rosewarne was the grandmother of us all.
And the story goes that 2 Gary men died and got up to heaven. And of course St. Peter was there. So he came back and said, where are you 2 from? So he said, well, we're from Gary in Camborne. So Peter said, well, I'll have to go back a minute and look into this, because we don't get many from down there. And you know, when he came back, the 2 men had gone, and so had the pearly gates.
The British surf team at the 2002 World Surfing Games in Surf's Up, soon on ITV1.